Hello, Jonathan. Delighted to be chatting with you. Myself and Steve Evans here with me.
Lovely.
Hi,
Thank you very
Jonathan.
much thank you for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to be on the show.
Yeah, it's good to have you, and it's a bit unusual to see an Everton shirt with a Scottish accent. It's
Definitely,
not
yeah.
very often you see that. If it's a blue shirt, it's normally Rangers, isn't it? But
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
um,
No, very much born and bred Evertonian. Yeah, very much so. Yep. And I'm 5,000 miles away. That's the thing. It's a Scotsman in an Everton shirt 5,000 miles away in Canada. There you go. I'm an international man of mystery.
yeah, that was my next thing because I was just gonna say because you're not even in Scotland or Liverpool. You're in Canada, of course. So
Absolutely.
whereabouts are you in Canada?
So we're staying in a city called Grand Prairie, which is in the northwest of Alberta. So we are
I
about
know it. I know
three
it.
quarters of the way across the country in the middle of the prairies, just north of the Rockies. We're about 100 miles away from the border with British Columbia. And it's lovely, beautiful part of the world, absolutely beautiful part of the world. It's been cold, but it's not been cold. That's the weird thing. Like, everybody back in the UK, family and friends and stuff like that, are asking, is it really, really cold? And I go, right, well, it was minus 18, yesterday. But it's strange because it's not the same. It's not the same kind of cold that you get in the UK. Very, 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 very damp. Very, very, dreich. A really, really good Scottish word is always very, very dreich in the UK. Whereas here it's very, very dry because it's just like a grass desert. The prairies are just like a grass desert. So it's strange. It's been minus 18, 19, and don't get me wrong. I've still got a coat. I've still got my hat and gloves on and things like that. I wouldn't fancy going doing a speedo Mick to make another Everton reference. I wouldn't fancy doing one of them up and down the street. But yeah, it's lovely, beautiful part of the world, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I've been out in the prairie when it's minus 18, and it is that dry cold. It's still cold. Don't get me wrong, but I suffer with the damp. But out there, it doesn't bother me as much. It's really strange, isn't it? As you say.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we had 17 centimeters of snowfall in 48 hours last week, 2 weekends ago, sorry. And I was out shoveling it, and like I haven't shoveled snow since I was a nipper, and I did my back, of course, doing it. So now I've got a snowblower. But the weird thing is, it's not that sort of slushy wet snow. It's like sand. It's like shoveling sand. Thankfully, it's a lot easier. Still did me back, so what can you do?
Yeah, I got some pictures from a friend who's cousin actually, who's in Ontario last week with snowy pictures of their garden. I was like, wow, that seems a bit earlier than usual. I don't know, is that right?
Yeah, well, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. What we're told is apparently it's been quite a mild fall, autumn.
But you normally get a bad winter then, don't you?
And that's it. And then the winter comes in, and I don't think people were expecting quite as much snow so early in November. But the thing is, I mean, we've been over here we lived in Edmonton for 3 months before we came up to Grand Prairie, and the summer was amazing. It was baking hot, and it's been a nice change to be able to know that you can wear shorts and t-shirt sort of 2-3 days in a row without the heavens opening up as it is in Liverpool, as it is in Glasgow, where I'm originally from. It's been a refreshing break. Although that said, funnily enough, I was back in the UK in September for the Bloody Scotland Festival in Stirling, and I was all over the UK because I was in Liverpool seeing my family. I was in Manchester, Stirling, Glasgow, Edinburgh, London. And I was amazed to see that all the trees were still green, because when I left Calgary, because I flew from Calgary to London, the trees were bare, and it was you fly back and the place was still green and lovely. So it's the weather. That's it. We Brits, we can't stop talking about the weather. Doesn't matter where we are in the world. That's the weather. That's it.
But Bob, before we talk about your latest novel, The Bingo Hall Detectives, tell us what you do for fun outside of writing, outside of work. Is it football? You're actually playing football?
Yeah, well, I was going to say I'm an Everton supporter, but that's not fun. That's not. Nobody in their right mind would consider that to be fun. But yeah, it's Yeah, I play a lot of football. I do play a lot of football, and have done for a long time now, as my knees and ankles can attest on the morning afterwards. I love it. I've always loved football. Always loved playing football. I've tried to play at least sort of kind of 5-7-a-sides at least once a week since I've about 16, so you're going on about 20 odd years that I've been doing it now, which has been fantastic. Big music fan, love my music, all kinds of music really, mostly your kind of classic rock and country and stuff like that. Love my music, play a bit as well actually. I've started, I did play, I played guitar mostly when I was in university, and subsequently when I left, and then kind of gave it up for a while just because life gets in the way, you know what it's like. And then since we came over here in Canada in May earlier this year, I've sort of taken it back up, which has been nice. It's been nice to kind of come back to it and forgotten what little knowledge I had before about it. So yeah, and TV, film. And as you can see, my bookshelf,
nice bookshelf
behind me, it's reading all the time. I'm very lucky. I get sent a lot of stuff to read ahead of time if someone's daft enough to want me to pass a quote on or what have you as a writer, and it means I get to read all sorts, which is great fun, and a real perk of the job. It's lovely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, just stepping back a little bit, talking about Canada. Are you there permanently now, or is it short term, long term?
Well, it's sort of open ended. I mean, we came over for my wife's work. She's a doctor, and we initially sort of came over just to see if we liked it, if it was something that we wanted to do, and as I mentioned before, we lived in Edmonton for 3 months just to sort of bed ourselves in. Plus, there was all kinds of admin stuff with these, as you know, everything's admin. And then we moved up to Grand Prairie, which is a lot smaller a city. It's only about 90,000 people in Grand Prairie, compared to Edmonton, which is a big city, big global city. And yeah, we're loving. I mean, we're very, very different, but very, very much the same. So it's as long as they'll have us. But I mean, the thing is that obviously I'm with all my book stuff, that's all UK based and Europe based. And as I mentioned before, I've already made a trip back, and actually, we live, it's the 21st century and the world's only getting smaller, and being able to make that trip back and forth, I think all in all, I think it's 14 hours from door to door, and that's including going through security and departure and the flight itself to get back to the UK. Which is nothing, it's nothing these days. My mum and stepdad, they've been out, they've come out here, and they did exactly the same. And my mother-in-law is coming out in the new year, and hopefully my dad and stepmom, they'll be out shortly as well. So it's not the old. You wave people goodbye at the dock and never see them again. It's far from it. Plus, things like this, I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
we're chatting just now, aren't we? You guys are in Liverpool. I'm in Grand Prairie, and that's the world that we live in, which is great.
Yeah.
Tell us about your career as an award-winning broadcaster and journalist. How did this all begin? Is this from your degree course? You studied psychology?
I did. Yeah, I did. I studied psychology at the University of Glasgow, and very, very quickly realised that I wasn't cut out to be sitting bedecked in tweed listening to people's problems now. And I should add the caveat that my wife is a psychiatrist, and what she does is very, very important stuff. So she's the more empathetic one of the two of us. But I've always written. I've always loved the written word. I distinctly remember going on holiday when I was 3-4 years old, 5 years old or something, and being told that I wasn't allowed to take like my Lego and my Star Wars action figures and my Batman and Thunderbirds and all the rest of it. And I wasn't allowed to take them on holiday because it would be another suitcase full of stuff. Yeah. But what I was allowed to take was books, obviously, and a pad and pencil and pen and stuff like that. And I used to write stories. I used to write stories for my Lego and what have you. And then I would act it out when I got home. And that was really the first time. I mean, looking back on it now, that clearly was my, that was the spark that really kind of got me writing. I wrote my first, what you consider a real book when I was 17. It was about 120,000 words or something. I was still in school. and it was the worst. It was the worst rip-off of The Hobbit and Die Hard. The Hobbit meets Die Hard. It was the worst rip-off you ever like. And I should point out, it has never seen the light of day. That will go to my grave. That's how bad it was. But it was but you know, there's lessons that I learned from it. You know, the discipline, the dedication, the sitting down and actually having to write it. You know, I still employ, and don't get me wrong, and I say this all the time because I teach creative writing over here in Canada. I say you learn from things that you did wrong as well, not just things that you did right. And you know, knowing that if you leave it sort of 2-3 weeks between sessions of sitting down and writing it, you will just naturally lose the thread of where you were. Yeah. So I still employ these tactics. I still use these sorts of things that I learned a way back, you know, 100 years ago when I sat down to write it. I was always writing throughout university. I did creative writing classes and courses to kind of build up units and stuff like that when I was at uni, and I was always doing it. And journalism obviously was a big part, obviously, of being able to write is, or being a writer is writing every day, and being a journalist means that you get to do things like that. And I've been lucky enough to cover a whole load of stuff, a whole load of fantastic events, some good, some bad, not all wonderful, but that's the nature of the game. And then it wasn't, I think my first book came out in 2015, and I think maybe about 18 months before that was when I really wanted to concentrate on properly sitting down and having a go at maybe making a career of this, and I've not stopped since. Thankfully, people keep wanting me to write, which is lovely. It's really nice.
Okay.
So, you go to that bloody Scotland crime writing festival. Yeah. Now that's like a lit fest, I would imagine. But you also do a thing while you're there called Desert Island Crooks. Is that a panel of some description? Tell me a bit about that.
It is, absolutely. So essentially what I do is I host the panel, and it's maybe 2, 3, 4. We've had do you know, funnily enough, I've done it everywhere. I've done it all over Scotland, actually. I did it in a place called Cromarty, which is a way up north, way further north than it's beautiful. It's a gorgeous place, little village. It's on the Black Isle, which sounds like it's out in the middle of the North Sea, but it's not. It's part of the sort of mainland. It's a beautiful little fishing village, right? I think traditionally it was fish village, and you drive to it, and it's the middle of nowhere, middle of these rolling fields, and all you see in the distance is this massive oil rig. And you think, all right, okay, well, you're up North Sea, all the rest of it, and then you get to Cromarty, and it's only like 5 miles off the shore. So the whole beautiful skyline is dominated by this massive oil rig that's 5 miles off the shore of this place. But it's gorgeous. If you ever get the chance to do it, they do a wonderful sort of crime and mystery weekend there, I think in May or something like that, April, May. If you ever get the chance to go, I would highly recommend it. But I did Desert Island Crooks there this year, I beg your pardon. And Ian Rankin was among the writers on it. Ellie Griffiths as well was on there. So it's cool. Essentially what you do is I take them to a desert island, and they get anywhere between sort of 2 and 4 choices of books that they would like to be stranded with. Absolutely nothing to do with any sort of BBC affiliated show that might have a similar concept, but this is a wholly original creation. And it's always great fun, and there's always loads and loads of audience interaction as well. So I remember the pre-pandemic, I did it at Bloody Scotland, and at one point the way that the conversation went, we ended up, the panel, myself and the whole audience, were singing the theme to Black Beauty. You know, and you know, these are the fantastic things that just sort of you know, you can't ever plan for these types of things. And the panel were great, and it always hinges on the people that are on the panel, kind of taking it in the sort of tongue-in-cheek nature that it's always meant to do. And you know, I've always wanted to make it into a much more regular thing. And you know, but it's like time and everything else gets in the way. But it's always good fun, and I always love doing it. And I've been very, very lucky to have some massive names do the panel with it, and everybody has always been really, really enthusiastic about it. So yeah, Desert Island Crooks, it's always good fun.
Sounds
brilliant. Sounds an idyllic place to go. Really does. I'd really like it, because I like these out of the way book fests like that. I think they're great. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about. I mean, Bloody Scotland's in Stirling, and Stirling's a city technically, but it's, you know, it's sort of wedged in between Glasgow and Edinburgh. And it takes a bit of an effort to get there. It's not impossible to get there, obviously, but you can't fly into it or anything like that. And it's all, again, the scenery between Glasgow and Edinburgh, indeed anywhere in Scotland to get there, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's a wonderful. It's always got. I always feel that it's got a kind of like a Freshers' Week feel to it as a festival, because you get a lot of people going there and you haven't seen them maybe for a couple of months, or indeed as it's been the last little while, years. And everything sort of circulates around the three main venues that are all within walking distance in the centre of Stirling, and it's great. It's all. I've always been made to feel very, very welcome there, both by the city and the organisers, and would always recommend it. But the same with Cromarty, and I mean, that's it. You guys will know this. It's like there's always these lovely little festivals that are happening all year round everywhere in the UK, and the great thing is you get to discover these places as well when you go, if you're attending it as an attendee, or you're on a panel or what have you, and you get to see all these wonderful places, and places that, I mean, that was the thing I said in the lead up to Cromarty. I'd never been that far north in my life. I'd let alone in Scotland, but I'd never been that far north, as in geographically. So I probably wouldn't have been had I not been invited to do that festival. So it's, again, you get you get this wonderful sense of experience with it, and it's always nice when you get there as well. You're always made to feel really, really welcome.
Oh, good. Yeah. So we move on to, we'll talk about the latest novel. I know. Thank you for sending me the advanced copy. I'm totally hooked.
Pleasure.
I think it's an absolutely brilliant read. Can you give us a gist of it?
You say that to everybody, Terry. You tell that to all your authors.
Well, do you know, I wouldn't say if I thought it was awful, I wouldn't mention it. I'd just say, can you tell us about it?
I don't know how Terry does it. He reads so many books. I can't keep up with him, so he does really well, to be honest. And he's very honest. So go on, Terry.
Well, I mean, Terry, if you're gonna continue to praise me, then I'm happy just to sit back and say that's not a problem at all.
What I particularly like is the visual style. You've got this clock tower in the middle of the market square in Penrith, and you've got the Amita, the main character. By the way, is she Indian? Is she Irish? She mentions the word bairns for babies and things.
So she is Indian. Now this is the interesting thing, right? Right. She's first generation Indian immigrants. So her parents immigrated from India, and they stayed in Sheffield. And then she moved up when she was an adult to Penrith. And the weird thing is, as part of the research for this, I did quite a lot into the sort of local Cumbrian dialogue and dialect and things like that. And bairn apparently is a word that's I don't think is commonly used within the sort of Cumbrian dialect. And I'm sure when this goes out, I will be inundated with loads of hate mail saying that typical jock, what does he know? But the weird thing is, obviously my real mother-in-law is Irish, Northern Irish. Oh, okay. And the thing was, when the book first came out, now I've said this, the caveat is that I've said throughout the whole, chat about this book, is that Amita isn't based on my mother-in-law at all.
But he's a bit journalist, the Jason character.
And he's a much better journalist than I ever could dream of being, believe me. But he said, I've said that, and the weird thing was, I got like a review or an email or a DM on Twitter or something like that not long after it came out, saying that I thought, I was really surprised when it turned out Amita was Indian, because I thought she was Irish. So you're not the first person to say that, and it's clearly my subconscious projecting my own mother-in-law on it. So there you go. It's she'll be pleased with that. The book's dedicated to her. It's Margaret's my mother-in-law, so the book's dedicated to her. I couldn't very well not, I suppose. I would never have heard the end of it.
It sounds intriguing without going into do it too far, because we don't want to give the plot away, obviously, to our listeners. But is this a standalone, or are you planning to do a long-term series on this?
So there's another one out in April. So the second one is out this coming April. So the Bingo Hall Detectives, it's out here in Canada in January. So we're kind of ramping up to that at the moment, and I'm just waiting, as of recording, I'm just waiting on the edits coming back for the second one. I'm fiercely proud of the Bingo Hall Detectives. I've said ad nauseum probably now, and I'll say it again, that it's the best thing that I think I've ever written. And the next one, the second one, is the hardest thing that I've ever written, because it's one of these things that, you know, you write the best thing that you've ever written, but you've got to go and do it again. You've got to go do it again. You've got to do it better, you know. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a very, very nice problem to have, and it's in no way, shape, or form any sort of real problem. You know, there's a lot of people out there in the world that have got actual proper problems, and not that one. And I'm very, very lucky to have it. It's meant though that I've got a fantastic editor. Jen Pegg at HarperNorth. She's a wonderful editor. She's a wonderful support. The whole HarperNorth team are wonderful supports, and they've backed the book to the hilt, which always helps. I've been very, very lucky, actually. My whole career, I've always been surrounded by people on the publishing side of it that have been hugely enthusiastic about my work. It makes such a difference, because unfortunately you do hear horror stories from other writers that they've not had anywhere near that level of support, or indeed any support, and it makes such a contrasting difference when you hear those types of horror stories. Thankfully, not a lot. You know, they are rare, rare as hen's teeth, but they do exist, obviously. But it's like, listen, it's like any other industry. It's like any other business. It's like any other walk of life. Is that, you know, you get these types of scenarios. But just waiting in the edits coming back for the second one, and then I'll dive into that one with a view to it coming out in April 27th. I think is when it's released.
The Village Hall Vendetta.
That's it.
Same genre.
The Village Hall Vendetta. Yep. It's the same characters. Whole load of new characters. Slightly, still another murder. Still Jason and Amateur running around Penrith and Cumbria, trying to solve a murder. But it's there's some new characters there, and some new sticky situations to get into. That's the great thing about being a crime writer, is that you can have all these wonderful characters that you absolutely adore and just do all these terrible things to them. It's brilliant. It's fantastic.
I love the title, by the way, the first one, Bingo Hall Detectives. It made me sit up and beg straight and look straight away and think, what's that about? And of course, it's all about, I believe, or I think it's all about Amita being into bingo, because she's fairly elderly, isn't she? Like a pensioner. And,
she is.
She likes bingo and crosswords, so that's where the Bingo Hall connection comes. Yeah. So brilliant stuff.
That's it. Really, it's a brilliant title, and again, total fantastic support from my publisher. They've even got in the page numbers, and this is the weird thing. Again, this is the strange thing about being a writer, is that when you go out and you do events and podcasts and stuff like that. The strangest things get picked up on by readers that you almost don't think of, particularly when you're writing it, that you don't think will get picked up on. So one of the things that's been really, really popular has been the bingo ball numbers, page numbers, but also the chapter titles. So the chapter titles are all named after bingo calls. So it's like chapter 1, Kelly's Eye, two little ducks, 22. And this is what I keep saying to everybody. None of these were my idea. This was Jen, my editor's idea. She said, "Oh, we could do that. We could do this."
That's brilliant.
And the great thing is, particularly with the chapter titles, some of them are way off. Some of them don't make any sense to what's happening in the chapter. But some of them, strangely, bizarrely, are quite pertinent. I won't spoil it with what it is, but some of them are spookily, are eerily on the mark, because that's the thing. I didn't title them as I was writing it. It wasn't until we got to the edits and we were going through it and we thought, right, okay, well, we can name the chapters after the bingo calls. What frightened me was the amount of bingo calls that I already knew just off the top of my head. I didn't have to look them up, and that's my late great grandmother's influence on me, is that she used to take myself and my brother to the bingo, and they've just obviously lodged themselves somewhere in my psyche. Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, going on to your publisher, is you call them HarperNorth, HarperCollins, is it? We call them in this country. It's slightly different. They the same.
No, Harper. Yeah, HarperNorth are they're an imprint of HarperCollins. So they were set up in, I think it was 2020, and they're very much there to celebrate writing from the whole North, essentially. So I think their tagline, I'll probably get into trouble for this because I don't get it right, but their tagline is bringing the North to the world. So they celebrate Northern writers, not just obviously Scottish people based in Scotland, but north of England. They're based in Manchester. Right, okay. And so what you'll find is all the writers or all the books will have a sort of northern angle to them, whether it's the setting, whether it's the author, whether it's the topic. And they do non-fiction as well, and really, really prolific and some absolutely fantastic writers. And again, across the board, not just crime writing and not just cozy crime, but you've got police procedurals in there. You've got books by doctors who've worked in the front line of disasters all over the world. They've got it might be of interest to you two guys. They've got a history of United against Liverpool, in the sort of Premier League era, and that sort of building up of that rivalry that came out, I think, just in the summer.
Oh right, okay,
sounds good.
And again, for more for football fans, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but on Twitter, there's the Cheap Paninis account where it's a couple who draw footballers. They've got their World Cup. I've got it somewhere on the shelf, actually. It's somewhere up there, but I got an advance copy. I've followed them on Twitter for years, and so they've got a World Cup edition that's out from HarperNorth. So again, just they take risks. They support authors from the north, indeed anywhere, I suppose anywhere in the world, but it's with a particular focus on books that are either in and around the north of England and Scotland and beyond. But yeah, very, very supportive. Cannot praise them and cannot thank them enough, really.
Okay.
Did that all start, and did you find it easy to work with them, or did you fancy going down that self-publishing route or not?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, so I've been with HarperNorth. I think I signed the deal for my two Bingo Hall detectives in May of last year. Yeah, May 2021. And it was just, to be honest, it was just a conversation that I'd had with Jen. Jen's not just my editor, but she's the editorial director, and the publishing director, I beg your pardon. And we got chatting. I think I'd been doing some reviews and stuff like that for some of their work, and I just got chatting to her. Said, look, I've got a couple of ideas that I'm thinking about. I don't have a publisher for these at the moment. Would they be of any interest? And she loved the idea of a mother-in-law, son-in-law detective duo running around Cumbria trying to solve a murder, and it really went from there. And again, cannot fault the support. It's been really from day one. They've been absolutely enthusiastic behind the project. Yeah, and they do. I mean, that's the thing. They do it with every author. They are very, very quickly establishing themselves as a kind of go-to as a go-to a publisher, particularly with a focus on the north. And Jen's got bags of energy, and she's a wonderful support, as they all are, as everybody in the team is. And yeah, that was it. Self-publishing's I did a bit of self-publishing before I was published. So Morbid Relations, my debut, that was self-published for I think about three months before I was offered a contract for it from Ringwood Publishing. So it had to be removed, obviously, because it was getting traditionally published. It's a fantastic platform for writers if you're considering doing it, because don't get me wrong, it's hard to. It's a hard industry to break into. It's a hard industry once you're in it. But it is an industry, and I always say this to writers, aspiring writers, is treat it as an industry, treat it as a business, treat it professionally. Be professional in your approach to it. Educate yourself on how the business works, who you need to be speaking to, what to speak to them about. I always say, you wouldn't go into a hospital and perform open heart surgery without going to medical school. Sure. It's exactly the same. It's the publishing industry is an industry. It's a business, and people that work in it are professionals. And if you're wanting to be a part of it, then you need to be professional as well. And the best person that can equip you with that sort of skill set is you. And that's it.
Yeah. You've mentioned a great deal of support that you've had within the industry for your work. Do you think, with you having a sort of background in broadcasting especially, there's more chance that your work may be seen on the big screen? Do you think that would give it a bit of a boost? Your connections?
That would be wonderful. That would be fantastic. Yeah, I wish it were the case. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept. It's not something that I allow myself to think about, because it's a very, very, everything takes ages in broadcasting, in particularly things like drama and comedy drama and stuff like that. And I'm a big radio drama fan, actually, and I've always loved that as a format. And I actually sometimes think, when I go back and read my own stuff, that I sometimes think that I've almost had that in mind when I was writing it. But I mean, listen, look, TV movies. That's the dream for every author. I think is the
ambition, isn't it?
Yeah, up there. Yeah. Absolutely.
I know you use Twitter as your social media platform, or one of them, and you've got the solid blue tick, which is always a bonus.
I do.
Well,
I do.
It is at the moment until Mr. Musk decides whatever he's doing. Yeah,
exactly.
It's a real one, isn't it? You're not paying for that, Jonathan. No,
not yet.
It's legit. Yeah.
So, do you use other social media? I think you use Facebook as well, don't you?
I do. Yep, I've
got Instagram or TikTok and.
I for my sins I do use Instagram, and for even more sins I do TikTok. I'm too old. I'm too old for I can't compete with what the kids are doing on TikTok. My TikTok presence is minimal. So the last thing I put up there I think was me shoveling snow, or was me with the snowblower with the Simpsons Mr. Plow, and that's about it. I mean that took me like 6 hours to work out and come out with and know how to do it. I'm too old for TikTok, but it's a wonderful. I mean, well, strangely, very, very quickly, I heard a news report on the radio the other day. They are saying that apparently TikTok it's either the fastest growing or it's already the #1 search engine here in Canada, and that's frightening.
Yeah,
it's frightening that that's where people tend to go to now. But it's a huge thing. I mean, it's a huge thing in the publishing industry as well. Book talk is a massive thing. You can't go into a bookshop over here, and indeed, I think it's in the UK now as well. You can't go into a bookshop without seeing a shelf and a table that says, what's trending on TikTok, and it's here to stay. And as much as I'm an old dinosaur, it's fantastic, and I will continue to embarrass myself on there as long as they'll have me.
Okay.
You've mentioned just before about tips you give to an upcoming writer, like treat it like a business and education industry. Any other tips that you'd give to someone who is writing a book for the first time or thinking about it?
Certainly. You got to write. You got to actually sit down and write. And there's no right and wrong way or there's no right and wrong amount of words that you do per day. But I would always try and get something down every day. It can be 10 words, it could be 5 words, it could be 50,000 words. It doesn't matter. I'm a great believer that you can have the absolute best novel that's ever been written, the greatest characters, the perfect setting, all the rest of it. But if it remains up here, nobody's ever going to get to read it.
True.
So you've got to sit down and write it. And actually, the sitting down and writing part of it, in the long term, it actually ironically is a very, very small part, because you've got editing and all the rest of it that goes on there. But you can't edit a blank page. That's the old journalism trope. You can't edit a blank page. And I would always encourage you, doesn't matter how much it is or how little it is, try and write something every day. And it'll just go from there. It'll just grow organically. I promise.
That's brilliant advice. Yep. Brilliant. But on that note, Jonathan, we'll have to say thank you very much. We've absolutely enjoyed your company. I think it's the quickest it's ever gone.
It's been fun. Yeah, it's been fun as well. Yeah, it's been really good.
It has.
A pleasure, an absolute pleasure.
But let's keep in touch as we have been, and maybe another chat with the release of the second volume.
I'd love to. Brilliant. I absolutely love to.
We'll hold you to that. Brilliant. Definitely.
Absolutely.
But for now, cheers, Jonathan.
Yeah,
thanks, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.